to another episode of Size Eyes, the life of a long-term multitasker. You may have noticed, just reintroduced that phrase back into it. So I think I'm really going to lean into that long-term multitasker, as that's the brand that I really want to be portraying and exposing and espousing of myself, and hopefully other people catch on as well. Lean into that. So anyways, this episode is going to be the foundation, the setting up of everything that or the different podcast model that I want to be introducing. I initially thought that I was going to be introducing this in Q2 at some point, or at least at the beginning of Q3, but with all of the episodes that I've scheduled and have been released, looking at my life operating system, this is probably going to be released sometime in September or so. And so I want to set the stage for how this podcast model is going to be changing going forward. So as you notice, I guess before the life operating system, it was just kind of a lot of different ideas, different concepts. Some of it, one episode looked at a movie, one episode just thoughts. Obviously the first few were just off the cuff, just rambling on. Not that this is too much different, but definitely more structured now. I actually have an agenda, some prep that I've done, rather than just turning my mic on, right? And obviously the life operating system set the stage for how I've grown and the process and systems for doing so in the past, in 2021 basically. Can't believe it's only been, less than a year. But tremendous growth, right? Within that structure, I have unlimited freedom. And that growth has been spurred because of that freedom and because of that structure that I've placed. And so the structure of the life operating system set the stage for who I am in terms of, how I'm operating on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly, quarterly, etc., how I'm growing, how I'm organizing things, all that. So hopefully you've listened to at least some, if not all, of those episodes so far. A lot of, I think, 20 plus part series for that. But that's concluded. The most recent episode was on leveraged content, how I can really put out 4 or 5 different types of content on a very frequent basis. And so that leads me to how I'm going to be changing the podcast model from a rambling thing to a structured of my life operating system to now to a 4-part, 4 different types of series within one podcast. So what does that mean? So actually, let me take a step back here with you to tell you what that means. So a few months ago, I was journaling and came upon the model of the TLDR of life. And so I'm not sure exactly when this was, but sometime late Q1 or maybe early Q2 of 2021. And so what is the TLDR of life? It is, I realized that we essentially in life do 4 things. We think, we learn, we do, and we relate. Right? So all of our time, all of our energy can be kind of bundled into those 4 different categories. We're either thinking or learning or doing or relating, and sometimes doing multiple, and they're all interrelated, right? I can be learning by thinking, I can be learning by doing, I can be relating and thinking at the same time, etc. So it's not mutually exclusive, but we are doing at least one of them all the time. And so, it fits perfectly in terms of, it's a TLDR of life, too long didn't read of life, so it's a condensed version of life. So it's a double entendre there, if you will, a double pun. And so this TLDR of life model that I've kind of lived by, I kind of gauge myself on my days. Am I thinking enough? Am I learning enough? Am I doing enough? Am I relating enough throughout the course of the day, throughout the course of the week, month, and quarter? And I can tell sometimes, I just have that intuition now where, oh man, I've been learning a lot, but I don't think I've been applying it as much. So I need to let's do something. Let's apply what I've learned. Let's make progress on my projects, etc. So, and then as the weeks have gone on, I've gotten better at balancing all four of those things, because if you have too much of one or too much of even three without the fourth one in balance, it's going to create an imbalance. And you're not going to have a fully balanced, a grounded life. And so, what does that mean for the podcast, right? So, once I realized I had that model, that TLDR of Life model, I wanted to fit that in and really show that, to portray that within how I, within the podcast, basically, right? And so how do I do that? So I wanted to have 4 different types of series that correspond to each of these 4 different letters, each of these 4 states of being, if you will, of thinking, learning, doing, and relating. So what does that mean? So for the thinking, I really want people to think. Henry Ford once said that thinking is the toughest thing we do in life. That's why so few people actually do it. Right? I want to normalize thinking. Because we're always busy doing. Sometimes we're busy learning. Sometimes we're busy relating and being social and all that. But how much do we spend our energy on thinking, just retreating from society for a little bit, or even for the day, or even within the day, at work, right? I want to normalize thinking. So this thinking series is going to be called 1% Growth. This 1% Growth series is actually going to be a little bit of a different one compared to the other 3. But this 1% growth represents, the reason I named it 1% growth is because every day, if you grow 1% and compound it, it's going to have, I forgot what the actual number is, but so much growth over the course of the year compared to even if you decrease by 1% every day, it's such a massive difference over the scale of a year and then years, decades, etc. over your life. So I want to make that 1% growth. It's those habits that people cultivate, that you cultivate to make a part of you, make you, right? You want to instill within your identity. And so that's really that 1% growth. For me, right, the thinking, the method that how I think is very much portrayed within my journal, within my blog posts. So hopefully you've read some of those, or if not, I highly encourage that, because that really provides the deepest topics on what I'm thinking on a daily basis, personally, at work, with my friendships, etc. And so that really provides the deepest insight into who I am and how I approach life. And so this 1% Growth series is going to be taking a look not only at my blog posts, right? So that's my free-form journal. But it's also going to be taking a look at my list journal, which I use for daily tracking purposes. So I've an episode on this before, in terms of all the different things that are laid out and that I keep track of within my list journal. So I'm not going to go through each of those. But as I record these 1% Growth series episodes, I'm going to be taking a look at, I'm going to be picking a day within that month or so to look at each of the sections within my list journal, right? My improvements, my 3 best things, my 3 worst things, what am I grateful for, my different imprints or body shape notes that I've noted down? What are my learnings for the day about myself, about the people, about the world, etc.? And so, as well as give quantitative numbers as well for how much I slept, diet, output, focus, energy, my overall daily score, right? So all of that, as well as my 6-time book, things which are focus, which have an area and a focus of energy management, as well as compassion and communication. So working on a couple different things, checking in throughout the day, right? So I'm going to be taking a deep, deep look at one specific day and going deep within my list journal for a specific day of that month. So if you think about that, that's a monthly kind of cadence there, right? Once a month. In addition to that, within this Thinking 1% Growth series, within this podcast, I'm going to also kind of be doing a mini series off of this, but it's going to be still 1% growth. It's going to be just reading. It's going to be audio transcription of my blog posts, of my journal. Because in addition to reading, in addition to writing that journal post, I want to be able to really give that voice to the reader, to the listener, to really get in not only my head, but to really understand how I'm intonating things, how I'm articulating things, how I'm thinking about things, not just from their perspective, right? Because they can be biased when they're reading something with something recently that they've consumed or that particular day that they're reading it on. But I want them to hear my voice to see how I'm approaching things, right, for that particular day. So within this 1% growth series, it's going to have my blog posts as well as a deep, deep look at a specific day, looking at my list journal entries. So that's the thinking side. Next comes the L of the TLDR of Life model, which is learning. And this learning piece is going to be, this series is going to be named Fully Content. So it's a little pun here as well, since it's all about learning, right? It's all about content, but I'm fully content when I'm consuming this content, right? And so it's going to be an analysis of one piece of media or a course or a book, etc., that I've consumed anytime really, but probably more recently, within that month or so. So it's going to be an analysis and a synthesis of that content. It's going to be my interpretations of the content that is there, because anyone can consume that content that I would be talking about, but the way I relate it to my life is going to be unique. The perspective that I bring is going to be my own, and I think that is something valuable for myself and potentially for others who listen. And so I want to share what quotes are in there, what resonated with me, because obviously there's different technology and different things to get the quick, the 5-10 takeaways or the quick quotes from it, or things that you can take action on right now, like stuff like that, or get a 15-minute synopsis of the main points of the book. And all those are very valuable. However, when you actually read a book fully, or if you watch a documentary fully, there's going to be things that are not part of the main points that are going to be maybe even more valuable to you, because it's something very narrow you picked up, and maybe you can make it a part of your identity, something that you cultivate as a habit or a daily practice. And so those are the things that I want to be keying in on, as well as relating that piece of content to other pieces of content that I've read recently or consumed at some other points, but really creating a web of ideas, of concepts, and really making it fully content, right? But I'm fully content doing it. And the other thing here is the context of learning itself, right? Obviously, we think that learning is all about learning about the external world, learning about finance, learning about business, learning about health, learning about all these different things, learning about the world, learning about other people. And that's all, my perspective is, all of that is a means to an end of learning about yourself. Learning about myself is the most important thing. And learning all about these external things, working at a company, working at a business, doing your job, is all a means to an end. And so I really want to be leaning into that as well, of learning for the purpose of learning about myself, with that end goal in mind. So that's the learning component of the TLDR model. The next one, I think they're increasingly interesting. I think this doing one might be the most interesting, but we'll see. So this doing series is going to be called 150-Year Plan. So this is a recent thing that I didn't come up with, but I read and heard from, I think, a Robin Sharma course. And so this is a question that I believe he said that, I think different monks from the East would ask about this question, because we all have a 1, 3, 5, 10, maybe 20, maybe year plan. And if longer than that, you're unique. But how often do we ask the question, what's your 150-year plan? This forces you to think about the long term after you're gone. When your children are old, let's say, when your grandchildren are key contributors to society, etc. So that creates a level of legacy that you have to think about longevity, about what are the things that you're laying the foundation for that will live on long after you're gone, right? It's these ideas that live forever. Not the people. It's the souls that live forever, and it's the ideas from these souls that live forever. And so, why is it the 150-year plan, right? So that is basically going to look at all of my bold ideas that I have slated for my life right now, and obviously it's going to continue to add, but essentially within my projects database, I have a lot of different bold ideas that I want to execute on and build and create and make a reality. What I envision, what I'm visualizing, what I am picturing, what I'm imagining, I want to manifest that into reality. And so I'm not going to, so some of the things, I was initially going to call this bold ideas, but after I recently came across this question that I asked myself was, what's my 150-year plan? I was like, that's the name for this. I want to potentially create, educational system. So that was going to be my main focus of this. But I also wanted to focus on a new type of governmental system, right? Redefining what business means, and all these different aspects of our lives from birth to death that I think are, as Vishen Lakhiani says, rules of bullshit rules, of things that we think are real, but they're not really real. So I want to reimagine what real is and reimagine what life can be. And reimagine this reality that we live in. And so essentially what I wrote a recent blog post on this as well, in terms of I want to create a community, a city that is fully optimized, that is based on intentions of love, that is focused, that is maximizing their potential, all those things, so that society can grow externally, obviously, but more importantly, each of the people that make up the society can learn internally about their inner world and really have true success, not gauged by these rules, not gauged by external factors, but success coming from within. And so basically, I want to document this journey of creating this city, of creating this community, or whatever the scale ends up being, right? All these different sectors. I want to document this from the very beginning so that, one, I hold myself accountable to actually doing it. But really, it's showing the progress, showing the process, and that, in 10, 15, 20, 30 years, when someone asks, how did you do this? I don't have to write a book on it. I don't need to condense it into a 30-minute podcast episode where I'm a guest. No one needs to necessarily make a documentary on it, etc. All the content is going to be there because I'm talking about it every month for however long until it's a reality. And even when it's a reality, I'm going to still continue to talk about it, how we're improving it, all that stuff. Right? Because it's all a process. I want to show this process and show this progress. And so, that's the real main intention behind having this doing series called 150-Year Plan. And then finally, the fourth model, the fourth piece of this is relating, right? Thinking, learning, doing, and finally relating, the TLDR of life. So this relating series is going to be called Casually Profound. So what I notice when I talk or when I listen to other podcasts is the guests really talk about, or when the host asks questions about the guests, about what they've done, about their past and what they've done, right? But really, I want to be asking questions and really getting to know the person behind who's done those things, the soul, the spirit, the intentions behind who's doing all those activities, who's had those successes, right? It's not about what they've done, but who they are. Are they unconsciously competent people who've gained success externally by these external factors, or are they consciously competent people who know exactly what they're doing, why they're doing it, how it's going to benefit society, all that stuff. I want to have deep conversations that provide transformative insights, profound moments, and comfortable silences. I want to normalize thinking, right? Because I have a lot of these deep conversations naturally with friends and connections that I'm like, wow, at the end of it, I feel so energized. I want to share that with other people. So that's what this really is. I want to capture those moments that I have with friends and all these people conversationally, right? So we're casual about it. It's a casual conversation. I want to be recording this, with this lavalier mic at a park or at a restaurant or somewhere that we're just having a normal conversation, but I like to take things, very deeply, right? Have profound conversations. And usually in these conversations, there's going to be some moments in there that we both just go like, wow, that was pretty deep. And that makes you think, not only myself, but the other person. And when these conversations are being recorded, I want to make the audience think as well. Right? Normalizing silence and thinking. So there's going to be actually a few components within this as well that I'll give a highlight of now, but obviously as I'm starting to record with actual guests, we'll see how they actually how they actually transgress, how they actually unfold. And so I think at the beginning of this relating, of this Casually Profound series episode with a guest, with a conversation partner, I want to start with some deep breaths, or maybe even a very short, quick meditation to really get in the mood, not only for myself but the other person and the listener as well, to put them in the right frame of mind to have this deep conversation. right? I want to ask questions that no one else is asking these people. I want to gain insights into their life, into their mindset that they haven't thought about before. And so I want to craft these questions carefully, very intentionally, and obviously on the fly as well, right? But I think I've done that before. I'm experienced at that, not on a recorded level, but in a conversational setting. And so trying to recreate that. And one of the other things is, since I want to normalize silence, I don't just want to talk about it. I want to actually do it, right? I want to show the way. I want to show the example that it's okay to have silence in a podcast. So I'm going to have, however long the episode is, or the conversation is, I'll roughly gauge halfway through or so, maybe 20, 30 minutes in, I want to have a 30-second, 1-minute break where no one talks, but we just think, we just reflect on the conversation that we've had up until then, so that we can really process our thoughts and emotions and feelings and ideas that we've just discussed for the past 20, 30 minutes. And then from there, I'm going to have the guest ask me a question, because what I realized is the best way to learn about someone is not by the answers that they give, but by the questions that they ask. And so when we allow the guest to ask a question, that really puts the listener in the mind of the guest. And so then we can really understand what they're thinking about. And they will have had, 30 seconds, 1 minute with that silence, with that break, to really think of a question, to really think of a deep question that may relate to something that we've talked about, and spin it forward, spin this discussion that we have levels beyond what it may not have gotten to without that pause, without that necessary time for thinking, right? And so I think there's, and then obviously I think there's I think there's a surprise as well, or at least for the first episode. But I think there's 3 questions that I want to ask everyone, and it's over the course of the interview, over the course of the conversation, I want to ask them, and hopefully that there's some insight that's drawn for me, and really for them as well. I want them to learn about themselves while I'm recording. Like, how cool would that be to capture that moment of this, let's say, really successful person coming up with a new insight right there, instead of things that they've already talked about or thought about before. I think that would be really wonderful, really insightful, really amazing for myself, for them, and for the listeners. So those are the 4 series that I anticipate on releasing. And so if you do a quick math there, these 4 series, if I just do on a monthly basis, I'll be releasing an episode every week, basically, right? So one, let's say, take a month. In September, let's say, first week is going to be thinking. The next week is going to be learning. Week 3 is going to be doing. Week 4 is going to be relating, and repeat, right? Obviously, there's going to be 1 extra week every quarter. I'll have to fill that in somehow. But I don't think it'll be an issue, especially with reading the blog posts. There will definitely be content that will be produced, so I'm not worried about that. So it fits really perfectly in with the cadence of a month, of each of these separated by a month. So it'll have enough time for me to make progress on those projects within that 150-year plan series, or to fully digest content within that fully content series, right? And I'm not pressured to have too many interviews with guests, and I can take time researching and interacting with these guests, maybe beforehand, etc., right? So I have time, not putting too much on my plate. And all of this, right, is really to ingrain the idea of all these different aspects of our lives that we do, but we may be doing unintentionally. I want to give intention and attention to each of these aspects of our lives, of thinking, of learning, of doing, of relating, all of these very intentionally with focus. And so that is what I'm trying to provide here. So hopefully you've understood what my main objective here is. And obviously stuff is going to be changing. I'm going to be iterating on it. And if there's feedback on, specific pieces of it, etc., I'm 100% ears, 100% all ears. And I want to keep improving, right? This is a process. This is not a stagnant thing that I put out and then I've never changed, right? I want to keep growing, that 1% growth in action here, and not just release it and keep steady, keep stagnant, right? That's not how I operate. So hopefully that gives you insight into what you can be looking forward to. And I'm really looking forward to this. I'm excited to share even more how I think, how I learn, how I do, what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, who I'm relating with, how I interact with who I'm relating with, etc. So I'm excited to share that journey with you, and hopefully you're excited to share that journey with me and with everyone else. So with that, I want to thank you for listening to another episode of Sai's Eyes, the life of a long-term multitasker. I'll see you when I see you.